I'm really excited to share this video finally. I've been meaning to make it for a while. I wanted to show my process of making the Jedi Temple Guard boots. It's one of the most popular costumes that I've made as a commissioner, and I'm excited to show how I've achieved the look of covering the boots. I'm hoping this video will help others with their own boot projects, whether it be the Jedi Temple Guard or another character. I think it's really helpful to know how to cover pre-existing boots to be more custom to what you want. So here we go. I started by stuffing the boots to help hold their shape so I could get a more accurate pattern. In this video, I show two different pairs of boots and I switch back and forth a bit on them, but the process is the same regardless. Next, I wrap the boots in plastic wrap to protect them from the tape layer I add for patterning. I use clear packing tape because it's easier for me to figure out where to place my style lines. Then I draw out my style lines using a permanent marker and referencing the boots in the show. The zipper still needs to be functional, so I make sure to pattern where the zipper is so it's accessible later. For this next set of style lines, I approximate where they are based on the proportions of the actual boot. Once I'm happy with all my style lines, I cut the tape pattern and pull it off the boot. I also label my pattern pieces so I know where to place them when I cut them from fabric. This part is a little bit tricky because you have to make sure you're cutting through your plastic wrap layer for this as well. Once my pattern is off the boot, I separate the individual pieces and lay them out flat on my table to transfer them to paper. Then I use my ruler to clean up the lines. I didn't film this part, but you'll want to true up your pattern by walking the seam lines to make sure they're the same length. You can also add registration marks so you know where to line up your pieces when you're sewing them. Once I've made sure all my pattern pieces are trued up, I added seam allowance. Here's all the pattern pieces laid out flat. Then I cut all my pieces out of my fabric. I pinned the top bands together, the back details, and the toe boxes. And I pinned the top of the foot sections together and the main bodies together. I used a regular straight stitch on my machine for these. For the main body of the boot, I opened my seam allowance and top stitched them down so they would lay flat. I marked my seam allowance on the top band and top stitched the main body to the band. I added a lining to the top edge so it would fold into the boot and have a clean finish, and I used a cotton fabric to reduce the bulk. Then I did a test fit of my fabric so far to see if I needed to make any adjustments before moving forward. I tried to pin the fabric as much as I can where I intend to sew it so I know where to adjust if needed. It's much easier to make any alterations needed at this stage since the fabric isn't attached to the boot yet. I was pretty happy with the fit that I had, so I decided it was okay to move forward to the next step. This set of boots got a little wonky in the back with my patterning because I was trying to save fabric. I knew this section would be covered eventually, so I was okay with that small section missing to reduce bulk. These boots have two different color tones, so I use the same fabric, but paint the main body with a wash of flexible paints to make it a few shades darker, and I'll link the paints I used below. I used a scrap piece of upholstery foam as a brush to get a more even brush stroke. Here you can see what the wash of paints do to the color. I stitched the bottom edge of my lining into the boot first with my machine, and then I flipped the rest of the boot cover in place and stitched the darker band down. Then I machine stitched next to the zipper as much as the boot would fit under the foot, and I used a piece of cardstock to help keep the fabric from shifting. I hand stitched as much of the bottom edge of the body as I could, and the rest I glued down. Then I added the foot covers by hand stitching the bottom edge near the toe and gluing the rest using this super Fabri-Tac. Please note, this glue should be used in a well-ventilated area, and I should have been using nitrile gloves, and I will do so when using this glue in the future. I trimmed away any excess fabric along the bottom edge of the boot. Then I stitched the toe box section so it would look like it had a squared toe. And then I glued this section down. Next was stitching the knee pads. I had my faux leather layer, a thick layer of interfacing in the middle, and a lining. I also stitched 2 lines of plastic boning in the knee pad to the lining layer to help keep its shape. Then I top stitched the outer edge to help keep all the layers laying flat. So this is the part where I show another boot that I worked on. I pinned the knee pad in place and was able to machine stitch along my top stitch line to keep it in place. Then I added a strip of fabric to hide the zipper by machine sewing as much as I could and hand stitching the rest. For these boots, I painted the bottom edge to match the lighter color of the boot cover, and I'll link the paints used below. I've made about 7 pairs of these boots now and tested a few different options, which I'll share photos of next. This is one of my earlier iterations of the boot covers where I've sewn the toe box on and did not use a zipper cover, which I didn't end up liking as much. This is my most recent version where I've added the zipper cover and painted the toe box instead of covering it with fabric, and it looks much cleaner to me. I know I showed a few different boots in this video, but overall the process is the same. I'm happy to answer any questions in the comments below, and feel free to like and subscribe so you can get updated when I share more tutorial videos in the future. Happy crafting!